Hola, cage fighting connoisseurs. This is KidNativeBloodyElbow.com, joined by Connor Rubish, filling in for Zane Simon, who's on vacation, with the sixth round of UFC 197. John Jones just squeaked by with the unanimous decision win over Saint Preux. Never in doubt, but not the dominating performance that maybe some might have hoped for.
Yeah, a little disappointing. I mean, it's not like Jones looked bad.
No.
He looked fine. He looked in control pretty much the entire time. OSP had a few good shots. I think OSP looked pretty good in this loss because he went in there with the best light heavyweight in the world, arguably the best fighter in the world, although Demetrius Johnson is staking his claim pretty hard for that title.
Yes, a much more impressive performance tonight.
Yeah, he got a few licks in, but I think the thing with guys like Jones is there are certain champions who are crazy dynamic before they get their belts. And then they have to learn discipline and risk management. That becomes like their priority. So guys like Jones and Jose Aldo and Benson Henderson went through the same thing.
GSP, most famously.
And then we have other guys like Rafael dos Anjos and Demetrius Johnson who get meaner with time. The more they hold onto their belt, they just decide to start whooping people's asses. And I love it.
I think there's a certain realization that, if I finish this guy faster, there's less chance something's going to go wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a type of risk management as well. When Demetrius Johnson puts all that pressure on his opponent, and he's constantly in his face and he's looking to attack him constantly, that guy's going to be a lot more shy to throw something back at him. It's going to be a lot less likely to hurt him.
Quickly run through the results of the big two fights. John Jones defeated Saint Preux, unanimous decision, 50-44, 50-45 twice. And then flyweight champ Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson TKO'd Henry Cejudo at 2 minutes 49 seconds of the first round. Really, Cejudo took him down the first time they locked up. Cejudo had a beautiful little, inside leg trip takedown? Or it just seemed like Mighty Mouse just crumbled in the clinch. I couldn't quite tell what Cejudo did, but he got right up. And from then on, the clinch became the death zone for Cejudo.
Yeah, Mighty Mouse, if you look at these two guys' takedown defense records, you'd be like, Henry Cejudo is clearly the better wrestler. And for MMA, I think Mighty Mouse's takedown defense is like 68%. Cejudo's obviously was 100% and still is. He wasn't taken down at all in this fight. But Demetrius Johnson is Pat and I were saying this in Heavy Hands. He is a fighter who is much more than the sum of his parts. You can test him in basically any phase. You can test him as a striker. You can test him as a wrestler. You can test his jiu-jitsu. But you give him a little bit of time, and he needs less time than he ever has in the past, it seems, to figure out how to put everything together and find how you react to one thing and how to exploit that with a different type of technique or a different phase. He's just he's a killer. And I think Demetrius Johnson, he's a little bitter now. I think he's bringing some resentment into the cage with him these days. I think he resents his opponents. I think he feels affronted that they think they can take his belt. He sure as hell enjoyed beating the hell out of John Dotson in their fight. And he didn't look like he respected Henry Cejudo's chances at all. And I think he resents the fans for not respecting him and not adoring him as clearly the number one or number two fighter on the planet, because he is amazingly good.
Yeah, he really is. Well, let's get back to Jones and OSP. Jones dominated. I would be one of the guys, like two of the judges, who had Jones winning all 5 rounds. But OSP, it's, I think, a combination of Jones being rusty and OSP being an awkward stylistic matchup. He's tall. We've seen that with Gustafsson. That gives Jones trouble. And he's got a quick punch, and that's Jones could not beat him to the shot on that. No. But the oblique kicks to the knee and the takedowns were more than enough for Jones to win.
Yeah, I think Jones looked a little, same as in the Gustafsson fight, a little uncomfortable that he could stand at his comfortable range with OSP, and OSP could still touch him. He wasn't quite as long as Gustafsson, but he was a hell of a lot faster, and so he could cover that distance in a blink, and that gave Jones a little trouble. And it's a little disappointing to see Jones not, especially when with the commentary, because I couldn't hear the commentary where I was. Were they talking about OSP's left arm at all?
Yes, of course they were. OSP apparently broke his arm, probably blocking a high kick.
Okay, yeah, because it became apparent around the second or third round that he was not using that left arm anymore. And it was a little disappointing after that point that Jones wasn't like, all right, I'm going to put this guy out of his misery. He tried at the end of the fourth round, and then he come out in the fifth round. I was like, he's going to take OSP down and destroy him. He didn't, but it's kind of like when I tried to get my girlfriend to watch Anchorman in high school. I was like, it's the funniest movie of all time. It's going to blow your mind. You're going to love it. I hyped it up so much. It let her down so hard. You know, you believe that this John Jones, greatest fighter on earth, he's going to be amazing, man. He's going to destroy him. He does crazy, violent things. He just beat Daniel Cormier, who's the champion. And yeah, it was all right.
yeah. I mean, Jones looked rusty. OSP, you could tell, was coming in on short notice and was a little overawed by Jones. Like, you could tell he was finding his way. I mean, this is a huge step up in profile of fights for OSP. And this is a guy who's been stuck at a level or two down below this and not even been that consistent at that level. You know,
I was impressed with his poise at the very least. He stayed pretty calm in there. I mean, he did all he could. He didn't have the time, and his style is always taxing because he explodes into everything. So he gambled. He took the few chances that he was given. He did the best he could with them. You know, it's no shame to lose to John Jones. I really think OSP gets a little bit of shine from this loss because he hung in there. He went 5 rounds. I put
Lots
a bet
of people
that Jones
never heard his name before have now seen him fight and put on one of the best performances of his career against the best fighter of our era. So yeah, he definitely comes out ahead of this. I mean, obviously an upset win would have been the big prize, but that didn't happen. Probably very slim chances of that ever happening with these two fighting. But a big win for him. And for Jones, it's really just a bump in the road. I think it's better for Jones, clearly, that he didn't dive right in against DC because he was very rusty. I'm sure the last year and a half has been brutal for John Jones, and that the octagon has not been forefront of his mind for much of that time. So, you know, I think a warm-up fight, and hopefully he's healthy and they can book, and that DC's healthy, and that they can book UFC 200 with these two headliners now that they've botched the Conor McGregor thing, but we won't get into that now. All right. So,
are you sure a lot more people will watch this video?
Quite possibly. I'm going to go on a rant about Conor McGregor that's going to offend everybody. Start tweeting about that now. All right, now, but seriously, let's get back to Mighty Mouse Johnson, because that's what the fans really go crazy
Let's
for.
get back to the real star here.
Honestly, this was the fight I was most excited about. Johnson versus Cejudo on this card. It's a fight I've looked forward to a while. I feel like Cejudo was rushed into it just a little. I mean, not in an unfair way, but I think for him, ideally, Cejudo would have had 3 or 4 more fights before he fought Johnson, but he didn't get that chance. It reminded me of nothing as much as Ronda Rousey against Sarah McMahon.
Yeah, that's a very good comparison. And like, Cejudo comes in with all this shine. He's got the gold medal. Did you hear he has a gold medal in freestyle wrestling?
I did. I heard. He must be very good.
It's mentioned it a few times, but you know, he comes in with all this hype, but like, that's the difficulty of the flyweight division and the way that the UFC matches fights. The UFC is always about the quick buck. They're always about making the best fight. And in a way, that's great. The UFC is, and MMA in general, has been so much more entertaining this year than boxing, because none of the fights we want to see are happening this year in boxing. None of them. Nothing big has happened since Mayweather Pacquiao, and that was 5 years too late. You know, whereas in the UFC, like, we mostly see the fights that we want to see. But the trouble with that is, how do you develop a guy who's only 10 fights into his career and he's got to fight arguably the greatest fighter on the planet in his 11th bout? You know, there's just no time for that. Now, Zane did say on the Vivisection it might be good for Cejudo, because Cejudo is that kind of guy who really seems to get a fire under his ass when he feels like he has something to prove. You know? And I think the fact that he knows there's a thing he hasn't achieved and that he needs to do it might mean that he could come back really strong in a couple of years.
He got a very object lesson in who's the best flyweight in the world right now, and it's Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson. All right, so then in the third fight of the night, we had Edson Barboza decision Anthony Pettis, and just an utterly one-sided bout. Pettis didn't have a game. He didn't have a game plan for Barboza. Clearly, I mean, he must have thought he was going to beat him striking.
Does Pettis ever have a game plan? Right?
Well,
that's the problem. Like, Edson Barboza deserved this win. Edson Barboza has worked so hard. He's gotten consistently better, even in his losses. We've been like, this is not the guy who got rattled by Danny Castillo 3 years ago. He is much, much better. He was beautiful in that the fight with Tony Ferguson. It was so close in the fight before that with Paul Felder. Very competitive with Michael Johnson, all these good fighters. And you give him a guy who's going to give him the kind of fight he wants, And he proved, I mean, he showed real craft in this fight. He worked the jab beautifully. He moved beautifully. He was always where he wanted to be in the octagon. I just thought he had this masterful control of range. And Anthony Pettis was there for the first time in a while with a guy who could match his striking ability, technically, could match his speed, and who was not going to fall for the crazy stuff that Anthony Pettis does. And Anthony Pettis has been this guy for so long who knows he can put you away with one crazy technique. And I think that has prevented him from improving to an extent. Whereas a guy like Edson Barboza, he's been knocked out, he's been hurt, he's been beaten up, he's scraped by or not won most of the really big fights in his career. He has had to get better and better each time. He has had to learn those hard lessons about how important it is to have fundamentals and technique and strategy. And I mean, I was so happy to see him pull it off here. My only question is, which round did Anthony Pettis win on two of the judges' scorecards? Because I didn't see a single round for him. I thought it was pretty clear.
Yeah, I didn't either. What I saw was an Anthony Pettis who went into Barboza's wheelhouse and seemed to be surprised to be losing, and didn't have a plan B. He tried a couple of takedown attempts, but it was pretty desultory and didn't work at all. And then he tried I saw him try a capoeira handstand wheel kick at one point, and a couple other. He went for a flying knee late, and that's it. You know, he didn't have a plan B. He seemed surprised to be losing the stand-up fight, and even when he was clearly several rounds down, he wasn't going for the kill. He wasn't trying to set up anything big. He wasn't going for broke to get a takedown and maybe a submission. He just had nothing. I mean, he this very frustrating performance from Pettis, former champion, and I wonder how long he was at Jackson Winklejohn and how much of an impact that made, and who can we blame for this, Connor? Can we blame Wink?
I don't think so. It's come
on, we'd love to blame Wink. We can blame Rufus, though, right? We can blame Rufus.
Maybe, but I think look at what Duke Roufus has done with Sergio Pettis. Sergio Pettis is a much better technical striker than his brother. He's got much better fundamentals. I think you can't really blame anyone but Anthony Pettis because he's Showtime. You know, he's this guy who can do all this crazy stuff. He can have a close fight with Ben Henderson and seal the 5th round by jumping off the cage and kicking him in the jaw. Like, that is not a guy who it's going to be easy to give discipline. And even the first round of this fight, he was throwing out this crazy shit. The guy sitting next to me at the bar was like, he takes a lot of risks, doesn't he? I was like, yeah, he does, but it works against a lot of guys because they can't deal with that speed and that athleticism. And
but Barboza's faster and a much better striker, and he has a Taekwondo background and can do half that crap.
Yeah, he can do the spins and stuff, but he stays disciplined. He goes to it when there's an opening. He stayed really tight. I did learn a couple things about fan perceptions of MMA this evening. Despite the fact that I thought Barboza Pettis was awesome, I was with rapt attention the entire time, completely enthralled. Guy next to me at the bar kept asking, I wish they would fight. Why aren't they fighting? I'm like, bro. And then guy on the other side of me, couple fights before DJ, Mighty Mouse took the cage, was completely certain that at a fat 220, he could beat Demetrius Johnson because he was only 130 pounds. Fortunately for his ego's sake, I think he left before he got to see what Mighty Mouse did to Cejudo, but it's weird to hear sometimes in public how people view these fights because, I thought those were two amazing performances. I was so happy to see Barboza win, not just because it was good, but also because I picked him, and I love to get an underdog pick right.
Let's see. That was a good pick. All right, let's move on to Whitaker and Natal. Robert Whitaker beat Rafael Sapo Natal by unanimous decision. What was this fight doing on the pay-per-view? And it wasn't terrible. Natal still has no cage IQ, and Whitaker poured on a couple of blitzes and almost took him out twice.
Yeah. You got to give Natal respect, though, man. He's done a lot with very little, and he used to get knocked out pretty easily, and he took some shots in this fight. He kept his composure. He beat Whitaker's legs up, too. He took what he could, and he did some damage. I think maybe what we saw in this fight is that Whitaker is much better when he can get an opponent who's going to come after him, who's going to stand in the pocket, who's going to try to exchange. And Natal was not playing games. Natal was moving around. He was peppering him with leg kicks. He was trying to stay at range, constantly circling. And I think Whitaker had a bit of difficulty tracking him down. I don't think he's very comfortable coming forward and throwing combinations and pressuring. And I think that's what we saw here. My guess is the UFC matchmaking expected this to be a first-round knockout for Whitaker, as I kind of did. But
yeah, Whitaker almost did it twice, but couldn't pull it off. But much more interesting fight. Featherweight, Yara Rodriguez in the opener knocked out Andre Fili with a leaping roundhouse kick. Second round, 2 minutes, 15 seconds. Just amazing. The first finish Rodriguez has had in his UFC career, which surprised me because that kid is somebody who's really gotten me excited, which never happens. Like I do not bother to learn the name of most of these new guys. Rodriguez totally has had me pumped, and I was really shocked to realize this was the first time he got a finish in the UFC, and what a finish it was.
Yeah, that double flying kick. I worry about guys like Rodriguez. I think, is he going to be another Anthony Pettis? Is he going to rely so much?
A pretty good run. He won the title.
Yeah. But the thing is like with that kind of guy, like Anthony Pettis is a guy who I think could win a title in any organization. Could he keep a title for long, like Jones or GSP or Mighty Mouse? I don't think so. Because once you figure out the holes in his game, like even Gilbert Melendez had a decent shot. He just couldn't stand up to Pettis' accuracy and power. So I worry a little bit about Rodriguez, but I love what I see from him. I love his bottom game. I love the fact that he's willing to take risks and everything. He's one of the few guys I've seen consistently make the submissions and kick game work. It's like him and Aljamain Sterling, and who else makes that kind of thing work without any boxing whatsoever, The dude can barely throw a punch, and he's just out there wrecking people.
Yeah. So he's got a little bit of time before he's going to be rushed into title contention.
I hope so.
But I think he'll be in the top 15 after this fight.
Sure, I think he deserves to be. Andre Fili is a tough cat. I mean, I thought it was going to be a pretty closely contested fight. I thought Fili was going to take a few too many risks, but Rodriguez really didn't have any problems with him. I mean, he kind of beat him up from pillar to post. So you got to give him a ranking now.
Yeah, you absolutely do. And for me, I just love seeing the Taekwondo style really working in MMA. It's one of the few of the traditional martial arts that has yet to really make an impact or have. I mean, there's been more Taekwondo than people know. I mean, there's a lot of guys out there with Taekwondo backgrounds. Edson Barboza, for one. Anderson Silva, a lot of Taekwondo. But Rodriguez is a guy who is very closely linked with Taekwondo and who you can clearly see, this is a Taekwondo guy. Like anybody with not any sport, MMA literacy, but a fair amount can see, yes, this is actual Taekwondo we're seeing and it's working. So that's fun. And also easily the most successful Mexican in the UFC. So that's got some potential demographic appeal that could be big for the sport.
In a division with a ton of fun matchups available, like featherweight is just brimming with fun action fighters these days. There's a ton of great guys you could give Yair Rodriguez. And I think the other thing, he's kind of on the cutting edge with his ground game too, because I think we're going to start to see a lot more guys with dynamic leg lock games, because I think that's what allows him to be so crazy with his kicks. He knows if he gets in the bottom, he'll get you with butterflies or half guard. He'll attack your leg, and he's not even trying to finish you. He will just threaten to sweep you, and he'll get back up. So no matter what, you have to watch your legs, and you got to at least roll to safety if you're going to try and get on top of him. So it allows him to just kind of threaten you everywhere, and so it's very difficult to capitalize and take him off balance or something, even when he's throwing this crazy double kicking, flying kicks, and all this stuff.
Yeah, that's traditionally been the knock against Taekwondo techniques in MMA, that they put you on your back too easily. And, the grappling game he's got is a perfect complement. All right, and the headliner of the Fox Sports 1 prelims, Anthony Pettis' younger brother, Sergio, who I've been calling the prodigal Pettis, beat Chris Colletti's unanimous decision. Pretty good performance. Didn't blow anybody's brains out or anything. I mean, but a good win for Pettis.
Yeah, I'm just happy they're giving Pettis the younger fights like this. I mean, they brought him to the UFC. They gave him all these tough matchups. Granted, Ryan Benoit was not a tough matchup. It was a dangerous one, but not like it wasn't too much too soon. But we've seen he's had these issues with maybe discipline or focus, something like that in the fights where he just kind of starts to coast or kind of loses his energy or his aggression and gets hurt. And give him fights like this. Chris Colletti is not super technical, but he's tough. He fights really well as an underdog. He comes forward really aggressively. Got a great top game to complement that. But he's not an amazing fighter. So you give Sergio Pettis the chance to deal with that kind of pressure without someone who's that likely to change the course of the fight in a single shot. And I thought he carried himself pretty well. I said, I think he's more technical than Anthony. I think he's really fundamentally a very good striker. He moves well. He sticks and feints a lot more than Anthony does. I think he's a pretty brilliant kickboxer, so I'm happy to see him.
Yeah, a good performance, and he's still very, very young, and I think we'll see him continue to improve. All right, then you had welterweight Danny Roberts take a unanimous decision over Dominique Steele. Thoughts on that one?
I kind of felt like Dominique had won, but he's from my hometown, so I was rooting for him pretty hard.
That's enough.
Well.
All right, so women's strawweight Carlos Parza beat Juliana Lima, unanimous decision. All of the Fox Sports 1 fights were unanimous decisions. Made for sort of a long, and with the commercials and everything, made for a long intermission, and the evening's fun. But Carla Esparza, last time we saw her, she was getting crushed in a title fight against Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Looked good against Lima. Not spectacular, not a very fun fight, but dominant performance from Esparza.
Looked like she had to get her confidence back in the striking. She started that fight standing about 10 feet away from Juliana Lima. Like, are you close enough to hit me? No, okay. But once she got her takedown game going, she did it pretty well in those exchanges. She started to look a little more like the woman who beat Rose Namajunas for the title a year and a half or so ago. Yeah. She had that confidence back by the end of the fight, which I'm glad to see because she is very good.
Yeah, that was a good win. And then lightweight James Vick capitalized on an eye poke to just beat the holy piss out of Glyco Franca for a unanimous decision. How they gave Franca, two of the judges gave him a round. I guess that's probably fair, and it would have been the first round pre-eye poke. Yeah. But, once Vick had him blind, and the ref didn't see it, Dan Miragliotta was oblivious to the eye poke, and Franca took quite a bit of damage immediately after the eye poke. What can you say?
I mean, I don't know if they're ever going to give James Vick a ranked opponent or someone higher up the ladder, or if they're just going to keep feeding prospects to him until he gets sick of eating them.
Yeah.
You give somebody, you give James Vick some fighter under 26 years old with like a 90% winning percentage, he's going to find a way to beat their ass. And I love it. Like, I just love it. It's hard. It's very difficult to get me to root for a James Irvin fighter. Very difficult.
Yes. Lloyd
Irvin. But, James Vick, man, he just keeps doing it.
Yeah, it was a brutal win, undefeated. So he's somebody to keep an eye on. And if you hate Lloyd Irvin, like so many do, it'll be fun to see him get his comeuppance.
They'll just make him fight Sage Northcutt next.
Yeah.
They're not going to give him anybody up in the division.
Now I doubt they give him that, but that would be fun. All right, so then in the 3-fight UFC 5-pass card, you had Walt Harris beat Cody East by TKO 4 minutes 18 seconds to the first round. Two heavyweights lumbering around throwing leather, and one of them got knocked out.
Satisfying. I thought Cody East was one of my most confident picks in this card. He's got a lot of potential. He's fast. He hits hard. He throws combinations. He moves well.
Harris hurt at one point.
Yeah, he did, and he looked okay. But he also seems like he might be kind of a trash bag of a human being. So wasn't too happy to, or wasn't too disappointed to have been wrong there. It was fun to watch Walt Harris knock him out. It was satisfying. I hope that Cody East learns from his past mistakes and becomes a better person. But until such time as I've seen proof of that has happened, I will continue to enjoy when 0-3 UFC heavyweights knock him senseless.
Yes, that was fun. All right, and light heavyweight Marco Sergeria de Lima submitted Clint Hester with an arm triangle choke. Bragged about how he wanted to show he had a complete game, but frankly, he beat the piss out of Clint Hester and then submitted him. I mean, it wasn't like it was a Demian Maia level jiu-jitsu performance.
No, I still remember when he jumped for a guillotine when he fought Eat Cry Love.
Yes,
and, like he had him taken down. He just got back to his feet. He's like, I'm gonna go for an arm-in guillotine. Come on, but he's the light heavyweight Abel Trujillo. Like he's a big front runner. He's a big old bully, and he fights really aggressively. But when you can't stop that, he's a scary man to be locked in there with. I'm a little disappointed to see Clint Hester lose 3 in a row, especially 3 finish losses. I thought he had some potential, but he doesn't really seem to be putting anything together. Like even his early wins, a lot of those he had to gut it out. He had to go in there and really fight for a decision or take a few licks before he got a knockout.
Yeah, it's too bad. Hester seems like a nice kid, and
Hmm.
he's got potential. But
Trains with
I
Josh Saman as well, I believe.
yeah, and but I doubt we'll see him back in the UFC. I predict he'll get cut, and I don't think he'll make it back. And then you had another sad story of the opener. Kevin Lee beat former Ultimate Fighter finalist, champion, whatever, Efren Escudero, unanimous decision. Really dominant performance from Kevin Lee. Escudero probably at the end of another UFC run.
You felt like it was a dominant performance for Kevin Lee?
Well, Efren came on strong early, but I
Yeah,
felt like
the last round was lopsided. But go on. Sorry.
I mean, I just feel like Lee definitively won the fight. If this happened in the playground or a parking lot, Efren got his ass whipped.
Lee definitely had the only really strong round. The third round, yeah. He took him down, and that really. But I thought Escudero was coming on pretty well. I thought he was teaching Lee a few things about tempo and range. He kept the jab on him. He pressured pretty well. Escudero is a guy who has met his ceiling. He's probably not going to get much better than this, but I have a real soft spot for veteran fighters like this. And I think if nothing else, he proved in this fight that he should not have been a plus 300 underdog to an untested guy like Kevin Lee.
That's true.
He comported himself pretty well. He was in there against a much more athletic, much younger fighter who hits harder, moves faster, all these things. I thought he did pretty well for himself, but I'm good to see Kevin Lee back on the prospect track as well.
Yeah, it was a good one for Lee. But let's get back to the main event. Jon Jones, what do you think about UFC 200 against Daniel Cormier? Should that come together, would you pick Jones to beat him?
I would. I mean, it's hard not to. And I think Jones would look very different. He's become very used to having smaller, shorter fighters come after him and having to respond to that pressure. And I thought he did a pretty brilliant job in that Cormier fight of running Cormier into the kicks and into the left hands to the body and letting him walk himself into the clinch and kind of just swallowing Cormier up whole when he came into the pocket. And he couldn't do that in this fight. So I think this isn't necessarily a reflection of how well he would do against OSP, but against Cormier. But I am glad, like you said earlier, that he got the chance to fight OSP. I think just like we saw with Khabib Nurmagomedov against Daryl Horker, the ring rust is real. You have a guy out for a while, you get all these nerves, and you give him a dangerous opponent. I was, by the second round of that fight, I was grateful that Khabib hadn't actually ended up fighting Tony Ferguson because he didn't look that comfortable. And I'm kind of glad that Jones got OSP instead of Cormier now, because I think he needed this fight to get his druthers back.
Me too. And Cormier, like you point out, does not have the height. He's got a severe height disadvantage against Jones, and so that won't play. But what do you think about the Anthony Rumble Johnson matchup against Jones at this point?
This fight kind of made it look like Rumble might have a chance. He's a lot more consistent than OSP,
and he hits a lot harder.
He hits harder. He doesn't have the stamina of Jones. He kind of has a bully mentality. I think he folds under pressure. And Jones, we know, doesn't do that. He deals with pressure tremendously well. But I mean, if Anthony Johnson can slip Jones's shots and deal with the fact that he still doesn't really have a jab and counter his kicks and stuff, I still really want to see that fight. I think this fight, if nothing else, kind of whet my appetite to see Rumble take on Jones and see how he deals with the power puncher who's a lot more dangerous than OSP was tonight.
Yeah, definitely. So Jon Jones beat OSP, and then Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, best pound for pound fighter on the planet.
I mean, I think he might be, man. People say his division isn't as tough as Jones's, but how tough is the light heavyweight division really? It's not welterweight. It's not lightweight.
Not at all.
Yeah, I mean, it has a lot more name value. That's the real thing that people mean, is that flyweight doesn't have any pride legends or any fan favorites, so there's no traction there. There's no stories to care about, and it doesn't have like a Conor McGregor there to be the arch nemesis of Demetrius Johnson, to give him a character to play off of. So he's just there beating the hell out of guys, but he's doing it so consistently that I think flyweight's not that bad of a division. It's shallow, but there's some
division. Yeah,
they're good fighters. They're very talented fighters, and Demetrius Johnson has to be given credit for making them look bad when they fight him. They don't come in as bad fighters, but they leave the cage knowing that they're not as good as Demetrius Johnson. I think that has to count for something. I'd probably put him at number one.
Yep. I think I would too. All right. So that's our show. So remember to give us a thumbs up on YouTube. Subscribe to MMANation.com on YouTube and get all our videos. Eugene will be back tomorrow with Knuckle Up. And then there's another UFC coming right on the heels of this, right? Is it next week or there's a week
I think
off?
there's a week off.
There's a week off, so we'll probably do If I Did It, and we'll have Heavy Hands with Connor on Wednesday. Then the next week we'll have all the fixings with the
May 8th, I want to say, is Arlovsky versus Overeem.
Ah, well, that's 2 weeks. No, that's just 1 week. April 30th next week. All right. So, and follow us on Twitter at KidNate, at BoxingBush, BUSCH.
Mm-hmm.
And any other plugs I need to give out? Read us on bloodyelbow.com, of course.
Yeah.
And so that's it. So thanks, Connor, very much for filling in ably for Zane, the absence of Zane Simon. Zane will be
Thanks
back
for having me.
presumably. And adios, MMA aficionados. We'll see you next time.